3 days after my daughter was born, my mother-in-law walked into my bedroom carrying a basket of wet laundry. She did not knock. She did not ask how I felt. She did not ask if I had slept. She simply set the basket near my bed and said, "These will not hang themselves." I was 22 years old. My body was still weak. My baby girl was asleep beside me in a small cradle. The room smelled of warm milk, wood smoke, and clean cloth. Outside the window, spring wind moved through the laundry line. I remember looking at that basket, wet shirts, aprons, baby cloths, heavy sheets, and I remember thinking, maybe this is what marriage really is. Not love, not rest, not tenderness, just proving yourself again and again. My mother-in-law's name was Ruth. Everyone respected her. She had strong hands, a straight back, and eyes that noticed every mistake. If bread was too pale, she saw it. If a floor corner held dust, she saw it. If a stitch was uneven, she saw it. And if I sat too long, she saw that too. She was not loud, that made it harder. A loud person can be ignored. Ruth was quiet, sharp, careful. Her words came softly, but they stayed in your chest. She looked at me that morning and said, "When I had my second child, I was back at the line before noon. I wanted to say, 'Good for you.' I wanted to say, 'I am not you,' but I was young and new and desperate to be accepted. So I slowly pushed the blanket away and placed my feet on the floor. My legs shook. My daughter made a soft sound in the cradle. Ruth looked at the baby and smiled. Then she looked back at me. Best to keep moving." That was Ruth's answer to everything. Pain? Keep moving. Sadness? Keep moving. Fear? Keep moving. A tired body? Keep moving. A tired heart? Keep moving. My husband Daniel came in while I was trying to lift the basket. He stopped at the doorway. He saw me. He saw the laundry. He saw his mother standing beside me. For 1 second, I thought he would speak. I needed him to speak. Just one sentence. "Mother, let her rest." That was all I wanted. But Daniel was a gentle man, and gentle men are not always brave men. He looked at me, then at Ruth, then down at the floor. "Maybe I can carry it outside," he said. Ruth gave him a small look. Laundry is women's work, and that was the end of it. He carried the basket anyway, but he did not challenge her. Not really. I followed behind him slowly, holding the wall when no one watched. Outside, the spring air was cool. The grass was wet. The clothesline stretched across the yard like a test. Ruth handed me the pins, one by one. I hung the clothes, one by one. Every sheet felt too heavy. Every movement pulled at my body. But I kept going, because I wanted Ruth to see that I was not weak. That was the beginning of many years of trying. Trying to cook the way she cooked. Trying to fold the way she folded. Trying to sew the way she sewed. Trying to be the kind of daughter-in-law she would finally approve of. But Ruth's approval was like rain in a drought. You could smell it coming. You could hope for it. But most days it never arrived. If I baked 6 loaves, she noticed the one with a cracked top. If I cleaned the kitchen, she ran her finger along the shelf. If I dressed the baby, she adjusted the bonnet. If I served supper, she said, "Daniel likes the potatoes softer." Always small things. Never enough to call cruel, but enough to make me feel small. At night, I would ask Daniel, "Does your mother dislike me?" He always looked uncomfortable. "No, she is just particular." That word, particular. It became the blanket he placed over every hurt. She is just particular. She means well. That is just how she is. She was raised hard. She expects a lot. Maybe all of that was true, but truth does not stop a wound from hurting. One Sunday after church, the women gathered for a meal under the trees. My daughter was 6 weeks old then. I had baked an apple pie the night before. I was proud of it. The crust was golden. The filling smelled sweet. I placed it on the table and waited. Ruth took one bite. Then she said softly, "My mother always used less cinnamon." No one laughed. No one argued. The women just kept eating. But I felt my face burn. I stared at my hands and wished I could disappear. That evening, I cried while washing dishes. Daniel stood behind me. "I thought the pie was good," he said. I turned to him. "Then why did you not say that?" He had no answer. That was Daniel's way. Kind in private, silent in public. He would comfort me after the hurt, but he would not stop the hurt while it was happening. And little by little, that silence began to feel like choosing. not choosing me. By the time my daughter was 3 months old, I had learned Ruth's footsteps. I knew the sound of her shoes on the porch. I knew the pause before she opened the door. I knew the way my stomach tightened before she spoke. That is not a peaceful way to live. But I called it normal, because many young wives did. Then one morning, Ruth came into my kitchen while I was feeding the baby. She looked around the room. The table had crumbs on it. There was a pot soaking near the stove. A basket of clean clothes sat unfolded near the chair. She looked at all of it, then she looked at me. "You are falling behind." Those 4 words broke something in me. Not loudly, not all at once, but quietly, like a thread snapping inside a seam. I looked down at my baby girl. She was warm in my arms, safe, fed, loved, and still. Somehow I was failing. That night, after Daniel fell asleep, I sat alone beside the window. The moon was pale over the orchard. My daughter slept in her cradle. The house was finally quiet, and I asked myself a question I had been afraid to ask. What if I never become enough for her? The answer came slowly, painfully. Maybe I never would. And the next day, at a quilt gathering, Ruth would say something in front of every woman there that made me stop chasing her approval forever. The next day was warm for early spring, the kind of day that makes people want to stay outside. The orchard trees were beginning to bloom. The grass looked greener. The air smelled fresh. Most people would have called it beautiful. I barely noticed. The quilt gathering was being held at a neighbor's farm. Nearly 20 women were there. Young wives, grandmothers, teenage girls learning to sew, babies sleeping in baskets, children playing outside. It should have felt comforting. Instead, my stomach tightened the moment I saw Ruth. She sat near the center of the room, as usual. Not because she demanded attention, people simply gave it to her. When Ruth spoke, others listened. When Ruth suggested something, others followed. When Ruth criticized something, others followed. When Ruth criticized something, people remembered. I took my place at the quilt frame and tried focusing on my stitches. My daughter slept nearby. For a while, everything was peaceful. Women talked about gardens, about church, about weather, about children. Normal things, safe things. Then the conversation shifted, and somehow it landed on me. One woman smiled. "Mary's little girl is growing fast." Another nodded. "She looks healthy." I smiled politely. Proud mother smiles come easily. At least they did for me. Then Ruth spoke, without looking up from her sewing. "Children grow whether a mother is organized or not." The room became quiet, not completely silent, but quiet enough. Everyone understood who she meant. Everyone. My face felt hot. I stared at the quilt. One stitch, then another, trying to act like I had not heard, trying to act like it did not matter, trying to act like my heart had not just dropped into my stomach. A younger woman glanced toward me. She looked uncomfortable, embarrassed for me, which somehow made it worse, because now people were not just hearing criticism, they were witnessing it. Ruth continued sewing, as if nothing unusual had happened, as if she had simply commented on the weather. And perhaps to her she had. That evening I cried all the way home in the buggy. Not loudly, just quietly, looking away so Daniel would not see. Of course he noticed anyway. He always noticed. Eventually. What happened? I laughed bitterly. "You were sitting 10 feet away." Daniel sighed, immediately understanding. My mother again. Not a question. A statement. I nodded. For a long time neither of us spoke. Then I asked something I had never asked before. "Why do you never stop her?" The buggy wheels rolled over the dirt road. The horses kept moving. Daniel stared ahead. His answer took a long time. Too long. "I don't know." It was the most honest answer he had ever given me. Not because it solved anything, because it didn't. But for once he stopped hiding behind explanations. For once he stopped saying, "She means well. She's particular. That's just her way." Instead, he admitted the truth. He did not know why he stayed silent. And somehow that honesty mattered. The weeks passed. Spring became summer. My daughter grew stronger, healthier, happier. Every day she seemed to learn something new. And every day I found myself caring less about Ruth's approval. Not because I had become stronger, because I had become tired. There is a difference. You can only chase someone's approval for so long before exhaustion replaces hope. That was where I found myself, exhausted. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I realized something. The basket was full, the house was clean, supper was cooking, the baby was sleeping. And yet, if Ruth walked through the door, she would still find something wrong. That realization hit me harder than any criticism ever had. Because suddenly I saw the truth. The problem was not my effort. The problem was the game itself. No matter how much I improved, the finish line kept moving. No matter how much I accomplished, there would always be one more thing, one more correction, one more comparison, one more reminder that someone else had done it better. For the first time, I stopped trying. Not my responsibilities, not my family, not my marriage. I stopped trying to earn something that was never being offered. Approval. That change happened quietly. No announcement, no argument, no dramatic speech, just a decision. Inside my own heart. Then something unexpected happened. Once I stopped chasing Ruth's approval, I started noticing things I had missed before. Things about Ruth herself. Things that did not make sense. For example, I never saw her rest, ever. Not once. She worked constantly. Morning, afternoon, evening. Always moving. Always cleaning. Always fixing. Always doing. Another thing, I never heard her compliment herself or anyone else. Not really. Even when something was done perfectly, she simply moved on to the next task. One evening, I mentioned this to an older neighbor, a widow named Esther. She listened quietly. Then she surprised me. Oh, she nodded slowly. She's still trying to impress her mother. I laughed. Her mother died years ago. Esther looked directly at me. I know. Suddenly I wasn't laughing anymore. Because Esther's expression was serious. Very serious. And the story she told me next would completely change the way I saw Ruth. Esther sat quietly on her porch. The evening sun was low. Birds moved through the orchard. A light breeze stirred the laundry hanging nearby. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Esther folded her hands and looked toward the road. Ruth was never good enough either. I frowned. What do you mean? Esther smiled sadly. The same thing I mean. Then she began telling me a story I had never heard. Not from Daniel, not from neighbors, not from anyone. A story about Ruth before she became the woman everyone respected, before she became the woman everyone feared disappointing. When Ruth was young, her mother had been known as one of the hardest women in the district. Nothing was ever enough, not clean enough, not organized enough, not fast enough, not proper enough. If Ruth baked 6 perfect loaves of bread, her mother noticed the 7th. If Ruth cleaned the entire house, her mother noticed the one dusty shelf. If Ruth worked all day, her mother asked why she had not done more. I sat there quietly, listening, because every sentence felt familiar, too familiar. Ruth spent her whole life trying to earn approval that never came. Esther looked directly at me. Some people never stop trying. Suddenly dozens of memories came rushing back. The corrections, the comparisons, the constant comments, the impossible standards. For years I believed Ruth was judging me. Now I began wondering if she was judging herself, and simply treating me the same way she treated her own reflection. That realization changed something inside me. Not overnight, not completely, but enough. Enough that the next time Ruth criticized me, I heard something different. A few days later, she came by the house. As usual, she noticed something immediately. She always did. The baby toys were still on the floor. A basket of unfolded laundry sat near the table. Supper preparations were only half finished. Ruth looked around, then said, "You are getting behind again." A year earlier, those words would have ruined my entire day, maybe my entire week. I would have replayed them over and over, wondering how to improve, wondering how to earn approval, wondering how to finally become enough. This time something different happened. I smiled. Not a fake smile, a real one. Then I simply said, "Maybe." Ruth blinked, confused, almost surprised, as if she did not know what to do when criticism failed to land. Then she looked at my daughter. The little girl was sitting on a blanket near the stove, laughing, happy, safe, loved, and for the first time, I realized something. My daughter did not care whether the laundry was folded perfectly. She did not care if the bread looked exactly right. She did not care whether Ruth approved. She cared that her mother hugged her, fed her, loved her, and suddenly that felt far more important. Months passed, then years. My daughter grew. More children followed. Life stayed busy, very busy. Ruth remained Ruth. She never became overly warm, never became overly affectionate, never transformed into the loving grandmother from storybooks. That simply was not who she was. But something changed between us. Not because she changed, because I did. The day I stopped trying to earn her approval, I stopped giving her the power to decide my worth. That freedom was life-changing. One autumn afternoon, many years later, I was helping prepare food for a church meal. Ruth was there too, older now, slower. Her hands shook slightly when she worked. Age had finally caught her. At one point, she dropped a serving bowl. Food spilled across the floor. The room went quiet. Everyone looked up. For a moment, I saw panic cross her face. Real panic. As if she expected someone to criticize her, correct her, judge her. The same way she had judged herself her entire life. Without thinking, I walked over, picked up the bowl, and said, "It is all right." That was all. Just 3 words. It is all right. Her eyes filled with tears. Not many, just enough. Then she nodded and quietly whispered, "Thank you." It was the closest thing to vulnerability I had ever seen from her. And in that moment, I finally understood. Some people spend their entire lives carrying expectations that were never theirs to carry. Ruth had inherited hers, then unknowingly passed them to me. Thankfully, the chain ended there, because I made a decision, a very important one. I would not pass it to my daughter. When my daughter made mistakes, I corrected her kindly. When she struggled, I helped her. When she failed, I reminded her she was still loved. And when she wondered if she was enough, I answered immediately, yes. Not because she was perfect, not because she never made mistakes, because worth is not earned through perfection. Now, looking back after all these years, I can still see that laundry basket sitting beside my bed. 3 days after giving birth, heavy, unfair, impossible. At the time, I thought the story was about laundry. Then I thought it was about Ruth. Later, I thought it was about marriage. I was wrong. The story was really about something much deeper. Learning that you cannot build your life around someone else's approval. Because no matter how hard you work, no matter how much you sacrifice, no matter how perfect you become, someone else can never decide your value. The day I stopped trying to earn Ruth's approval was the day I finally found peace. And that is the truth I carried in silence for many years.